Shin was a weak and pathetic nerd with no riz and no aura. But that was until an alien parasite attacked his body and replaced his hand. Though he wanted to get rid of the alien at first, he gradually accepts it as a partner and decides to fight against other man-eating parasites, becoming an absolute chick magnet in the process. The story starts as Shin wakes up from his sleep, hearing a faint voice that tells him that it was unfortunate that he failed. Shin panics on hearing this, but thinks that it was just a terrible dream that he had last night. He shakes off those thoughts and goes down to have breakfast, where his parents ask him if he is feeling fine because he was acting crazy last night. The pathetic nerd doesn't even remember the last night clearly and decides to skip breakfast to go school. On the way, his crush Murano suddenly attacks him from behind, but his right hand blocks the attack reflexively. Murano is surprised that he has such good reflexes, but Shin tells her that his hand just moved on its own. The very next moment, he starts getting freaky with Murano, who gets flustered and slaps him before running away. And their mutual friend Takai tells Shin that this is what zero biz does to a person. Anyway, once they reach school, Mick falls asleep because he couldn't get much sleep last night as an alien parasite attacked him. It tried to enter his brain through his ear, but that was blocked by his earphones, and when the parasite tried to enter his brain through his nose, Shin sneezed and woke up. He saw a brief glimpse of the alien and thought that it was a snake, but then it suddenly jumped at him and started burrowing into his right hand. Luckily, Shin still used his earphone cord to tie his arm tightly and prevented the parasite from going beyond it. And that is one of the reasons why wired earphones are still goated. His parents came rushing to check on him, and his dad immediately told him to change his dealer because he must be high on some bad stuff to hallucinate snakes penetrating his body. Shin suddenly wakes up from the dream of last night's incidents and finds a teacher in front of him. Angry that he is using his smartphone during class, Shin tries telling him that he didn't do anything, but obviously, the proof says otherwise. Later, Murano is still mad at him and Takai decides to become the mediator because she is worried about Shin's mental health. He decides to go home early and wonders if something is really wrong with his right hand, or if he is imagining things. On the way, he sees a girl carelessly crossing the street and a car coming straight towards her. He takes action instinctively, protecting the girl while stopping the car with his right hand. Shin can't believe what he just did, but as he looks at his right hand, he finds that it has changed shape and an eye has appeared in the center. It quickly returns to normal, but that is enough to freak him out, and he runs home. He has a panic attack in his room and tries to stab his right hand, which suddenly transforms into an alien creature that can talk in broken phrases, which is still better English than what the gift card scammers speak. It says that it failed to take over the body and only became the right hand after eating it. And Shin starts thinking that he is schizo. He suddenly attacks the alien controlling his arm, but it easily breaks the knife and sends it flying. The creature then asks Shin to teach him how to talk because he is not good at it yet. But then it suddenly falls asleep and his hand turns normal. Shin is bamboozled by it and he searches the net for any clues but doesn't find anything. And in the end, he decides to pretend to be normal. However, he is unaware that the aliens have already spread throughout the world, replacing humans and eating them. The next morning, Shin wakes up and finds the alien calmly reading books to gather information about the world. It can now talk clearly, showing signs of hyper-intelligence, and it can also transform into other creatures. Shin starts warming up a little to the parasite and asks if it is an alien. But the creature says it doesn't know where it came from. It only remembers things from after it awakened inside his arm. And the first thing he ever felt was dissatisfaction that he failed to take over his brain. That sends Shin into a panic. But the alien quickly explains that it can't do anything anymore since it has already eaten his arm and replaced it. If it had taken over his head instead, then things would be different, and he would be in charge of his body. Shin says that he is immediately going to the hospital to have his freak of a right hand cut off. But the alien says that would be a terrible idea because it feeds on Shin's nutrients, and if it gets cut off, it will die. Shin would also lose his right hand that has a mouth and can also shape shift, which is basically the greatest blessing a gooner like him can ask for. Shin calls it a parasite, but the creature says they should just cooperate with each other, just as it says that the parasite immediately gets tired and falls asleep, turning MC's hand back to normal. Later, Shin goes for breakfast and hears his dad reading the newspaper, talking about a string of brutal and violent murders dubbed mincemeat murders that have been happening lately. He heads to school after that, but decides that he should probably turn himself in to the police and tell them everything about his alien hand. However, the parasite tells him that it is not a good idea because they will be turned into lab rats for some cray-cray scientists. Suddenly, it warns him that one of them is nearby, explaining that parasites can sense each other's brainwaves. Shin decides to follow the direction of the new parasite, but he quickly gets scared because it might have taken over a human, and he doesn't know what to expect. His parasite, however, keeps dragging him forward, and they eventually find a dog eating the dead body of another dog. Shin wonders what is going on, but as he sees that the dog has been taken over by a parasite, he freaks out. The dog parasite looks at his right hand and says that it failed too. And then suddenly, the alien notices its killing intent. It drags Shin away to a safe place because they need to calm down before fighting. Meanwhile, the parasite dog transforms, sprouting wings, and takes to the sky. It soon locates them hiding in a park, but Shin's alien says they'll fight it here. It suddenly launches an attack at the flying dog with steel-edged tentacles, and cuts through its heart with one precise strike, killing it instantly. Shin can't believe what just happened because it was all so fast. But the alien carefully watches as the dead dog parasite shrivels up and dies. He coldly states that it lost because it didn't study enough. And Shin realizes that this thing he has partnered with has no empathy at all, and it is like an emotionless insect. In another part of town, a woman is being harassed by a group of thugs when a man suddenly appears and knocks them all down without breaking a sweat. He then walks the woman home, acting like a stoic guardian, but the thugs suddenly return to attack him again. They hit his head with a bat, but the man doesn't even flinch. Instead, he casually says that his stomach can't handle 4 people at once. No one gets what he means, but then, without warning, the skin on his face peels off like orange peels in a fruit-based face wash ad, and he slices all of them up with his razor-edged tentacles. The parasite then changes his appearance to not get caught and goes on his way. Meanwhile, Shin decides to keep the alien and not report to the authorities, because after the run-in with the dog today, he knows he would be in danger without it. He feels weird calling it the alien all the time, so he tries to give it a name. The creature asks him to call it Migi, since that means right in Japanese, although it admits that it doesn't really care about names since it is neither a person nor a pet. Later, thanks to Migi's help, Shin starts becoming really good at sports, which makes Murano simp after him. This also makes the class bully jealous because he likes Murano too. After the game ends, Takai brings Murano over to talk to Shin so that they can move over the past incident. Shin finally gets the chance to apologize to her, and she forgives him, but only if he agrees to take her out for dessert next Sunday. She's glad to hear that. But then Murano notices that something about him feels different. However, after she leaves, Migi remarks that Shin's heart rate was abnormal when he was talking to the girl, and he definitely has the hots for her. Just then, the class bully calls out Shin and angrily confronts him for getting all of Murano's attention. Shin tries to avoid the fight, saying that he can't do anything about it, but the guy attacks him without warning. Shin gets scared that Migi might get triggered and unalive this unlucky bastard, but luckily, he holds back and simply uses a Gamu Gamu no pistol to knock the bully down, and that is enough to scare him away. Later, Takai starts talking about the brutal mincemeat murders, the same one Shin's dad was reading about. No one knows who's behind them, but similar cases are showing up all over the world, which Takai finds too suspicious. However, Shin suddenly realizes that the ones behind all the murders must be the parasite aliens. Once they reach home, Shin searches more about the murders and asks Migi, who agrees that it is definitely the work of his species. He explains that they saw a parasite possessing a dog eat another dog, which indicates that they can only eat the same species as their host. He says that since they are cannibals, it is only natural that they eat humans when they use them as hosts. Shin panics on hearing this and wonders if he should inform the world and try to save humanity. But Migi doesn't get why he is even bothering with that. According to Migi, his kind just eat to survive, and that is just how nature works. Shin says that human life is valuable, but Migi argues that the only life he values is his own and Shin's, because he needs him. Shin calls Migi an insect and a parasite, but Migi warns him that if he goes against him, he'll chop off his tongue so that he can't tell anyone anything. Terrified of the parasite, Shin gives up the idea. Migi continues debating and points out that humans eat all kinds of animals, while his kind only eat a few, so in his view, humans might actually be worse. The next day, another alien spots Shin and Migi. Migi senses it immediately too and warns Shin. They can't find the alien in the crowded market. So Migi suggests going somewhere quiet, and Shin agrees. He says he wants to meet the other alien, but Migi thinks that is insane. He asks why he isn't afraid, since he could die even though he was crapping his pants out of fear yesterday. Shin replies that he wants to learn more about the parasites in order to protect humans from them. Soon, the other guy shows up. He looks at Shin's right hand and immediately thinks that it is dangerous because Shin's human brain is still intact. He calmly walks ahead while Migi threatens to kill him if he tries anything. The man makes an offer and asks Migi to migrate to him, saying that there is still time for him to change his host. To prove his point, he transforms his body, cuts off his own hand, and tells Migi to come to him as they will be stronger together. Shin panics, thinking Migi might switch sides, but he stays put. The other parasite gets impatient and attacks, but Migi reacts instantly and takes him down. The other alien is shocked and can't believe he lost, and Shin thanks Migi for saving his life. However, he replies that he wasn't even sure if switching bodies was possible, so this was the safer option. The next day, Shin and Murano go on their dessert date, and during the conversation, Murano says her parents are scared because of the mincemeat murders. Shin quietly wonders how she would react if he ever told her about Migi. They walk through a park after that and find a group of boys burying a cat in the sand and throwing stones at it for fun. Murano is hurt by the sight and says she can't stand watching it. She wants to leave, but Shin shows that he has a heart of gold like Superman. He walks ahead and rescues the cat, telling the boys to stop hurting innocent creatures. The boys call him a boomer for interrupting their fun and throw stones at him as he turns back, but Migi catches all of them. Shin then gives the boys an intense stare, which scares them off completely, and they run away. Well, that was more than enough to impress Murano, who grabs Shin's hand, but her instincts tell her that something is wrong, so she switches from his right hand to his left. A few days pass, and the number of mincemeat murder cases keeps increasing. Shin is disgusted by the news, and Murano begins to notice that he is growing even more distant and different each day. One day, while walking to school, Migi suddenly senses another parasite nearby. Shin grows alert on hearing this, but when Migi points towards the school building, he starts panicking like never before. At school, Shin anxiously scans the halls to find the parasite, and Migi warns him not to act suspicious because if the parasite is nearby, it might sense them too. Just then, a new teacher is introduced to the class as Miss Tamiya, and the moment she steps on the stage, Migi confirms that she is the parasite. What is even worse, she is assigned to be Murano's homeroom teacher. Shin grows uneasy on hearing this, and Migi again warns him not to look at Tamiya, but he can't help it, and the woman notices him, realizing that he is one of them too. Later, during the sports class, Migi comments on how smart Tamiya must be, because she has managed to maintain her host's identity and position in society, and she is also working as a teacher. Shin wonders if she plans to eventually eat everyone at school, but Migi says that she won't like to blow her cover, so she won't feed on people near her. In class, while Tamiya is teaching, Migi falls asleep, and Shin panics because he thinks he is in danger. He fumbles his way through the rest of the period, and after the class, Tamiya asks him to come to the office later. The other boys tease him, joking that he is getting attention from the mommy teacher, and Shin lashes out at them, because they don't know how deep in trouble he is. Anyway, he heads to the office, and luckily, Migi wakes up on time. Once they get inside, Tamiya gets straight to the point. She calmly assures Shin she has no desire to fight him. Instead, she invites him to meet after school for a more proper conversation. Migi immediately agrees, but Shin is suspicious, fearing it is a trap. Tamiya says that if she wanted to kill him, she would have done it already, and reveals that she just is curious about their unusual hybrid bond. She promises to exchange information with them and possibly even cooperate in the future. After school, Shin goes to meet her, but Migi suddenly detects two parasites approaching. Shin panics again, but Migi can't tell if it is a trap yet. Soon, Tamiya arrives there with a man she calls Mr. A because he has no name and no personality. Instantly, tension rises between him and Migi, but Tamiya diffuses it, saying there's no point in fighting. They all sit down to talk and Tamiya asks Shin what he thinks their kind are. Shin answers bluntly that they are man-eating monsters. Tamiya can see why he would say so, but she thinks they are more than that. She suddenly reveals that she and Mr. A did it raw a few weeks ago, and now she is pregnant. Shin stares at her, horrified, and Tamiya asks what kind of creature he thinks is growing inside her. Migi answers that it's a normal human baby and Tamiya confirms this, clearly puzzled by it herself. Shin refuses to be swayed by just this, believing they're still monsters who eat people. While the three of them are having their philosophical discussion, Mr. A gets bored. He stands up, declaring that he sees no point in such discussion, and he'll keep killing and feeding on humans as he did in the past. However, he now sees Shin as a potential threat and decides to eliminate him soon. Once he leaves, Tamiya warns Shin not to provoke her because if he tries to threaten her, she could easily kill an entire class including Murano, whom she knows he has feelings for. However, she reassures him that for now, she prefers peace and keeping her identity hidden. The next day, in class, Takai mentions seeing Shin on the bus the previous evening. She says she and Murano were worried about him, but he hides the truth from her. Suddenly, Migi whispers to him that they're under attack, and Tamiya also notices that it is Mr. A, who is already inside the school. Tamiya calmly dismisses her class to study on their own and steps outside. Meanwhile, Mr. A begins a killing spree, and Shin decides he has to stop him. Migi suspects that Tamiya won't get involved as she is too logical to pick sides, and she will just watch over them. Just then, they hear a message over the intercom, telling students to evacuate the building immediately. Migi suggests that they should fight and defeat Mr. A, and the best way is to use the crowd as a decoy and shield to counterattack. Shin is furious at this, and he refuses to do something so inhuman. Instead, he runs upstairs alone, but along the way, he bumps into Murano. She grabs his arm, but he snaps at her, telling her to stay away from him. He soon makes it to an empty classroom, and Migi says the previous plan was more effective. But Shin insists that he'll fight like humans do. Migi says nothing but understands that humans are driven by emotion, which makes them stupid most of the time. Shin quickly builds a barricade using desks and tables, and then asks Migi if he is angry at him for not accepting his plan. Migi brushes it off because they don't have time for that, and he is already planning their next move. He asks Shin what makes different from Mr. A, and the answer is that there are two of them and they can divide their roles. He quickly cuts and sharpens a chair leg into a makeshift spike and gives it to Shin as his weapon in the upcoming fight. He says that Mr. A underestimates humans, and if Shin can strike by surprise, they'll win. Shin listens carefully, then hides the weapon in his sleeve, and just then Mr. A crashes through the window from the floor below, turning Shin's makeshift barricade into a prison. Mr. A tells Shin that apart from the right hand, his entire body is useless and terrified of him, and that is not wrong. However, Shin remembers that Migi warned him about this happening earlier. Since Migi is dependent on him, if Shin gets flustered, it will hold him back as well, and he decides to calm himself. Suddenly, Mr. A starts attacking them and Migi blocks all his attacks. Shin remembers that Migi's plan was to pretend to attack while actually focusing on the defense, and since he underestimates humans, he won't see Shin as a threat. Shin has no choice but to trust Migi's plan, and he slowly walks towards Mr. A, who doesn't even pay any attention to him. That is his worst mistake as Shin manages to stab him in the chest with the table leg, and immediately attacks back, but Migi blocks his attacks. It is already too late for Mr. A as Shin's attack hit a vital artery in his heart and blood starts pouring out rapidly from the wound. He still manages to toss Shin aside and then pushes the steel pipe so that it comes out of his back and stops draining his blood. He starts stumbling as he walks away from Shin, and Migi says that they should finish him now. Shin doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to commit murder, but Migi tells him that Mr. A is not a human and technically, it is only murder if you kill humans. Meanwhile, Mr. A can't believe that he is going to be killed by a human. He has realized that his body is done for, and he decides to take a gamble and find a new host, preferably sharing Tamiya's body. He slowly walks towards her, but when he opens her office door, Tamiya jumps out. leaving a few oxygen cylinders open in the room. Mr. A doesn't even realize what she is doing until all the oxygen leads to a massive explosion, killing him before the cops can arrive. Shin becomes traumatized after that incident, and even as time passes, he doesn't get comfortable with the fact that he stabbed a human body. In the meantime, Tamiya gets in trouble with the school administration because she doesn't tell them who her baby daddy is. Rather than arguing with the dumb humans about her right to privacy, she decides to quit her job and change her identity. She meets Shin before leaving the school, telling him that since she is planning to discard her identity as Tamiya, she doesn't need to keep the people in her social circle alive anymore, and that includes him. Shin starts panicking at this and asks her why does she and the other aliens eat humans. He tells her that Migi can survive because of the nutrients in his blood, and that means the other parasites can also survive on other types of food. Tamiya says that he might be right, but cannibalism comes to them as naturally as flying comes to bees and spinning webs comes to spiders. She believes that all kinds of life on Earth have a directive except humans, and they do whatever their directive tells them to. She says that as soon as she took over a human body, she felt that her purpose in life was to eat other humans. Shin is terrified, but he still asks her what does she plan to do with her baby. Tamiya replies that she will give birth to it and then use it in some experiments, but if it isn't useful, she will eat it. Shin is outraged at this, and Tamiya senses his intentions. She transforms to fight him, and Migi realizes that they can't possibly win against her because she can morph in 2 patterns at the same time, which means she is much more evolved than him. However, Tamiya suddenly realizes that Shin is no longer a pure human, and she decides to let him live so that she can learn more from him. Later that night, she gets a visit from the mother of the real Tamiya, who figures out that the woman in front of her is not her daughter. She asks her who the hell is she and where is her daughter. And Tamiya is shocked because she never thought a regular human could see through her perfect disguise. The old woman decides to call the cops, but Tamiya kills her before that. However, now she is curious if the woman had some special ability that she should have researched more. On the other hand, as Shin wakes up the next morning, he finds Migi missing from his body. He freaks out, only to find that Migi has separated from his body and is taking a little walk around the room. Migi quickly reattaches with his body, telling him that he has found that he can move even after being separated from him, but his limit is 3 minutes at a time. Shin wonders if he is planning to take over his brain now, and Migi tells him that it is not possible because he matured just as an arm, so he can't control a brain. However, that makes Shin fear that other parasites who know how to control a brain can swap heads, and Migi believes that it might be true. He then goes to have breakfast and learns that his parents are planning to go on a trip. Shin tells them that it is really dangerous to go to unknown places in times like these, and his mother is willing to listen to him and cancel the trip. However, she wants to know if something has been bothering him lately, but he doesn't want to talk about it, so he abruptly leaves for school. The reason Shin is keeping Migi a secret from his parents is because he fears that Migi will kill his parents without hesitation, because he is only concerned with his own survival and doesn't care about human emotions. On the other hand, Shin's dad Kazu tells his mom Nabuko that she is being overprotective of their son, and he probably gets uncomfortable by that because of the scar on her hand. Nabuko clearly remembers the day when Shin was still in middle school, and he asked her for some aluminum plates for a science experiment. He tripped while trying to get those plates from a high shelf, and a pot of boiling oil almost fell on his head. Nabuko's quick reflexes saved him, but she badly scalded her hand that day, and Kazu thinks that Shin doesn't want to trouble her anymore because he feels guilty about that day. Meanwhile, Migi starts researching guns for future use. He tells Shin that he shouldn't be so worried about his parents because parasites seem to be concentrated in cities where there are a lot of humans to prey on, and they mostly target people who are alone. He believes that Shin's parents will be safer on their trip to the beach than they are here. Shin is relieved to hear this, but just then, his mom comes in, and he nervously hides Migi. She asks him who he was talking to. He replies that he was talking to himself and yells at her to knock on the door next time. Nabuko gets a bit sad on hearing this, and leaves the room, telling Kazu that their son yelled at her. He tells her that it must be because she interrupted him when he was spanking the monkey, which might be my new favorite phrase to describe the action. Later that day, Shin tells his parents that he has changed his mind, and now he thinks that it is a good idea for them to go on the trip. Nobuko, however, isn't going to take his mood swings sitting down, and she lashes out at him, asking what the hell is wrong with him. She starts crying, saying that it is as if he isn't her son. Shin still doesn't want to tell her about Migi, so he says that he was afraid that he would be lonely without them. But then he realized that he can just call some friends over if he feels too lonely. He goes back to his room with that, and his parents are convinced that he told them the truth. The next week, they leave for their trip, and Nobuko is really excited because she hasn't had any long vacation in the past few years. Somewhere else, a man is taking his new girlfriend out for a drive. But what he doesn't know is that she is a parasite. She doesn't understand basic human things like how seatbelts work and distracts him while he is driving, which causes the car to roll down the hill. Both of them get badly injured as a result. And as the parasite realizes the host's body won't survive, she grows desperate. She attacks the man and takes over his body. And though the takeover isn't perfect, at least she can move. Back at home, Shin is on his way to school when he asks Migi what Tamiya meant when she said he was impure. Migi explains that some of his cells leaked into Shin's bloodstream and even reached his brain, so parts of him have changed. Shin is shocked by this and tries to convince himself that he is still a normal human. Just then, he comes across a group of people beating up the school bully. He tries to stop them, but they punch him too and tell him to back off. However, Shin remembers Migi once saying that what makes humans different from parasites is their ability to act for others even when it doesn't benefit them. Wanting to prove to himself that he is still human, Shin stands up for the bully again. Mitsuo, the leader of the thugs, hits him, but before Migi can wake up, a girl named Kana steps in and tells her gang to stop. Kana then asks Shin if he is stupid, but when she looks at him closely, she senses something strange inside him. She suddenly notices Migi's presence and asks Shin what the hell is he, before getting scared and quickly walking away. At school, Shin gets a lot of attention and praise for standing up for his classmate, and he tries to act humble because that is another trait of humans. Later, on the way back, Shin and Murano run into Kana, who takes their picture and asks him why he didn't run away earlier. Shin says it's just what you do when someone from your class is in trouble, but Kana calls him a poser and says he acts all moral, but is probably hiding something. Shin walks off, not wanting to deal with the bitch any longer. But he knows that she is not exactly wrong. Meanwhile, Mitsuo is jealous that Kana is paying attention to Shin because he is hikey into her, and he decides to get his revenge. He and his gang beat up Shin and kidnap Murano, and Shin somehow follows them. They lead him to the same place they met in the morning, and Shin tells them to leave Murano alone. However, the thugs ignore him and Mitsuo starts beating him up. Migi wants to come out to help, but Shin tells him to stop because he wants to handle things himself like a real man. Even though he is clearly outmatched, Shin keeps fighting. Migi tells him that everyone here is much stronger than him, and he can't win against them. But Shin doesn't care because humans fight for things bigger than themselves. He tries his best to fight back, but gets cornered again, which triggers Migi's reflex to protect him, and Shin barely keeps him hidden. Luckily, Kana arrives there just then and tells everyone to stop. And the very next moment, some boys from Shin's school show up and a fight breaks out between them and Mitsuo's gang. In the confusion, Shin escapes with Murano, and she walks him home. She treats his wounds and tells him he was really cool earlier, leaning on his shoulder. Shin gets his hopes up and asks her if she wants to stay over since his parents aren't home, but she ends up going back home. Migi is disappointed by this and says he wanted to observe human reproduction. Shin tells him to shut up and go to sleep, but just then, Kana shows up and asks who he is talking to. Shin dodges the question, and Kana apologizes for earlier, saying she wants to be friends. Shin agrees because he sees no harm in that, but as they shake hands, Kana senses something odd with his right hand. Shin notices her discomfort and quickly pulls back, rushing inside his home, where Migi tells him to stay away from Kana because she seems too perceptive. He feels that she can sense the wavelength that parasites emit to find their own kind, and even though Murano has a similar ability, Kana has a much stronger instinct than her. He believes that this girl is really dangerous, and Shin agrees with him. In another location, the parasite that took over the man's body after the accident is struggling because it is not used to being male. It wants a woman's body again, and decides to take over the first female he finds. Unfortunately, Shin's parents are not that far away from the monster. As they are enjoying the sunset from a cliff, the monster suddenly appears there and takes Nabuko's head in front of Kazu. Later, Shin gets a call from an injured Kazu, who talks about a monster attacking his mom and tells him that he needs to go to the police. He cuts the call with that and Shin panics, afraid that the monster is a parasite who attacked his parents, but he doesn't even know where his parents are right now. He falls asleep waiting for more news and has a bad dream. But when he wakes up the next morning, Migi tells him an alien is here. Shin gets angry at him, saying his parents are in danger because Migi said they would be fine near the beach. Migi replies with stone-cold logic, telling him that his suggestion was based on probability and he never said anything was 100% sure. He then tells Shin to focus on the battle in front of them, and Shin grabs a knife to play his part even though Migi doesn't think his help is needed this time. The door suddenly unlocks, and Shin wonders how the alien can open the lock to their house. The alien then enters the house, and Shin gets ready to fight, but he is completely aghast when he sees his mom walk in. Though he knows the truth deep inside, he can't process it. He welcomes Nabuko home, confused and shaken, asking why is she not with dad. Migi quietly tells him it is not his mom but a parasite, but Shin refuses to believe it. The alien says the other man must have died before he could get home, and it is a good thing for her. In his confusion, Shin holds the knife in front of Migi, stopping him from transforming. He calls out to his mom, desperate to believe she is still there. Migi tells him she has gone, but Shin snaps and threatens to cut his right hand off if he says another word against her. The emotionally distressed Shin says he never even properly apologized to his mom for burning her arm when he was a kid. The parasite, however, doesn't care. She transforms and stabs him straight through the heart, and Migi can't react in time because of the knife. Shin falls to the ground, still unable to accept that his mom has become a parasite. The parasite then leaves Shin for dead, telling Migi that his host has died, and he will follow suit, as that is the fate for those who fail to take the brain. However, Migi realizes there is still a chance to save him. Shin's heart is damaged, so Migi creates a new one, places it inside his chest, and begins beating it manually, even though Shin remains unconscious. He enters Shin's body so that he can continue healing him slowly, while also relocating himself back into the right arm, which takes a lot of time. Shin is absent from school for days because of that, and Murano gets worried and decides to visit his house to check on him. Meanwhile, Migi keeps healing Shin and even feeds him while he sleeps. A couple days later, Shin finally wakes up. Though he has grown very weak now, he soon notices that he doesn't need his glasses anymore, which feels strange to him. He then decides to wash up, and that is when he finds a scar on his chest, which reminds him of the entire incident. He feels a sharp pain in his heart and has a breakdown. But just then, the telephone rings, and he picks up to hear that his father is admitted to a hospital. Shin is glad to hear that he is still alive and rushes immediately to see him. Outside, Murano is waiting for him, and as she sees Shin, she says she was worried about him. However, he seems detached and only tells her that his dad is injured, and he is going to see him. When she says that his mom must be dealing with it alone, it hurts Shin even more, but he walks away and says he won't return to school for a while. Murano is concerned and asks if he will come back, but Shin only gives a sad smile, before walking away and swearing to kill the parasite that took his mother's form. He gets on a train and thinks about finding the alien before it finds his dad. Meanwhile, Kazu is in the hospital and the police come to inquire, asking about the incident and his wife. He tells them that Nabuko died, but the cops say she is alive and that she returned to the hotel and checked out without him. Kazu panics and says that the woman is an imposter, but the police say the burn mark on her hand confirms her identity. A psychiatrist tells Kazu that it is his trauma from the accident that is making him imagine things, and he somehow convinces him that it is true. Soon, Shin arrives at the hospital, and when he rushes into the room, Kazu is surprised but glad to see him. Shin tries to talk about what happened with his mom, but can't bring himself to say anything because of the pain, even though he has no tears. Kazu suddenly says Nabuko has been missing since the accident. Shin is shocked and reminds him about the monster. But Kazu says he hit his head during the accident and must be confused. Shin flips out and insists that the monster killed Nobuko. But Kazu says he misspoke on the phone and that the injury affected his memory. He argues again, but Kazu scolds him while holding back tears, and Shin realizes that his father knows the truth but is hiding it. He is even more determined to find and deal with the alien, but understands he can't tell anyone what really happened. He says he'll stay at the hospital, but Kazu says it will be uncomfortable for him and suggests a nearby hotel just 300 meters away. Shin agrees, but he worries because that is Migi's range to detect enemies, and unfortunately, Migi is still asleep. At the hotel, Shin meets a girl he had seen on the train, and she leads him inside. He keeps watch over the hospital from his room, while realizing that his hearing and other senses are stronger now. Later, Migi wakes up and tells Shin that he has repaired his body, but both of them have changed, and now Migi has a weakness, which is, he must sleep 4 hours a day, which is more sleep than I get on a daily basis. Shin says that he used to sleep earlier too, but Migi says that unlike before, he won't wake up if danger comes, and if the enemy attacks during that time, they'll both die. Shin asks why he didn't tell this to him earlier, and Migi says after his mom died, Shin started blaming all parasites, including him, and it was dangerous to reveal a weakness to him. However, he now thinks that it is even more dangerous to keep hiding it. Shin says he doesn't see Migi as an enemy since he saved his life. But, like at Tsundeer, Migi replies that he did it for himself. Next morning, Shin looks much better and goes to the hospital to check on his dad, then stays on guard while Migi sleeps. The girl, Maki, approaches and asks if he has a girlfriend. But before Shin can answer, Migi warns that he has spotted a parasite at the beach. Shin immediately runs towards the beach, and Maki tells him that there's a wall blocking the way. However, he moves too fast to listen to anything. And then Migi asks if he is really ready to kill the woman wearing his mother's face. Shin stops for a moment and says he is sure, because he can't let her kill other people. Maki catches up to him while they are talking and says they have to circle around the wall to reach the beach. But Shin says it's a skill issue and jumps up the wall effortlessly. He finds someone walking down the wall and realizes that it is a parasite. He begins chasing it, filled with rage and ready to kill it. But as he reaches the guy, he finds that it is not Nobuko. Instead, it is a man, and Shin is surprised. However, he is sure that he is an alien too, so he gets ready to kill him. But the man freaks out, asking him to stop. Suddenly, Migi stops him and says the man still has a human brain. Shin is even more confused now. But then the man's jaw transforms into an alien and starts speaking. Shin freaks out again because he has never seen this before. But the man and the alien are sharing one mouth and seem to be having a friendly competition over who gets to speak. Shin can't understand how this is possible. But Migi explains that this duo's brain is human while the jaw to the chest is alien. And the other alien confirms that they are both similar in a way. Later, they sit down to talk, and the man begins sharing his sob story, saying his wife left him and he felt like a useless tool who couldn't decide anything. So he made the biggest decision of his life, and that was to jump into the sea, but he didn't have the courage to do it. He just sat there until the alien parasite attacked him, and as he struggled against it, they fell into the water. The jaw parasite continues the story and says that it was trying to reach the head, but realized that since the host was drowning, it would die if it tried to reach the brain. So instead it became a breathing pipe and saved him. And that is how they ended up like this. The man then tells the alien that they should switch to combo mode, and the jaw changes shape so both can speak clearly. The man says he is relieved to finally see another person like him and asks Shin to share the story of his hand. But Shin says they should go somewhere else to talk about that. The man then introduces himself as Yuta, and his parasite is called Joe, which is a clever wordplay on jaw. They go to the hospital where Yuta cries after hearing Shin's story, and Joe taunts him for being a crybaby. He shows more personality than Migi and says he learned a lot from watching movies. After that, Yuta offers to help Shin if he ever finds the enemy, and Shin is glad to accept his help. That night, Migi suddenly wakes Shin up and says there's something important he forgot to mention during the day because of Yuta and Joe. He reminds Shin about how he ran like Usain Bolt and jumped 3 meters high and says there's a reason for it. But before that, he gives an explanation about what his body can do. Migi says that his body can divide and each part can think on its own. But if the parts are too small, they die quickly. So he always gives them orders in advance to return to his body. He shows this through a demonstration, and Shin gets a bit creeped out. Migi then says that in Shin's body, even the smallest parts can survive, and he suddenly realizes what that means. Migi confirms it and says he used those small parts to repair Shin's heart, and they have now become part of his bloodstream. So now 30% of his body is made of alien cells. Shin asks if the parts reached his brain too. But Migi says he can't be sure and asks if he noticed anything strange. Shin says nothing at first, but then remembers that even though he was really emotional at the hospital, he couldn't cry. And he thinks that maybe it means he is becoming less human. Next day, Maki sneaks up on him, and Shin asks if he looks like a normal human to her. She says yes, but when he just smiles and doesn't reply, she gets flustered and tells him to speak clearly because it looks like he is crying inside. Just then, Shin gets a call from Yuta who says he has found the enemy and he'll try to stall her. Shin tells him to get back quickly because she is dangerous and will attack as soon as she realizes that his parasite failed to take over his brain. Yuta tries to run away, but he needs 2 months at the gym to be even considered fit, and Nobuko follows him at a casual pace. Meanwhile, Shin also runs in the same direction, but Migi suddenly falls asleep midway. However, he turns into a weapon, telling Shin that the rest is up to him. Meanwhile, Yuta is cornered at a cliff as Nobuko reaches him. She is shocked to see a second host whose brain is still intact, so she decides to kill him. She transforms and Joe is impressed because he wishes that he could do that too. The fight begins, but Joe can only defend because of the uncomfortable way he is joined to Yuta's face. They are pushed back quickly, and then Nobuko strikes his heart and throws him down, saying this will kill him for sure even if it is a hybrid. Yuta and Joe faint because of that and Nobuko walks away, but then she senses another parasite's presence with a weak signal. She is shocked to see Shin alive and says she should have gone for his head. Shin is furious at this and tells her to stop using his mom's voice to say she'll kill him. He decides to fight, but as she transforms, he can't watch her face. Nobuko suddenly attacks, but Shin can clearly see her moves now. He dodges and jumps behind her, and she can't believe that Shin can move so fast. He blocks her attacks and reaches the edge of the cliff, where he sees the injured Yuta. Shin thinks that the only person who could understand him is already dead, and gets furious. He charges forward, injuring Nobuko with his swift strikes. Shin aims for her head and cuts off her tentacles. But when he tries to finish her off, she uses her heart to defend herself. And when Shin sees the burn mark, old memories of his mom flood his mind, and he stops. Nobuko uses that moment to counter and injure him. Shin is in a pinch as she regenerates and stands back up. But then suddenly her head is sliced and chopped, and her body falls into the sea. It was Yuta and Joe who did it, and they managed to climb up on their own. Yuta tells Shin that the woman wasn't his real mom, but even then, he shouldn't kill her with his own hands. Meanwhile, the parasite wonders how Yuta survived, and Joe says he figured out she was only attacking the heart, so he changed its position in time. Shin then looks down at the sea where his mom's body lies and thinks that it is finally over. But something inside him breaks. Soon, Kazu is discharged, and they come back to the same cliff because that is where everything happened. Kazu tells Shin that his mom still loves him, and then Shin asks if Nobuko suffered in the horrible nightmare he had. Kazu replies that it all happened instantly and her death was painless. He starts to cry, but Shin is glad that at least his mother didn't go through any pain. Suddenly, the stress he was holding in all this time is gone, and he falls asleep on the spot. Later, he returns to the city, and this time both Murano and Kana can sense him strongly because he is no longer fully human. Murano runs up to him, surprised that he has grown taller, and even his looks have changed as if he hit a second puberty. On the other hand, Tamiya finds a new partner who takes over a teenage boy's body, and she tells him to watch over Shin but not to kill him. The boy asks why does she care so much about him, and she replies that he is dangerous, but it is still important to keep him alive in order to gather data and understand their species. Meanwhile, Kana has started paying even more attention to Shin, even using his photo as her wallpaper. But this makes the jerk named Mitsuo jealous. He goes to Shin's school to pick a fight. Without realizing, Shin has undergone a personality change on the same level as Sung Jin-woo. He is no longer the same old whip and tells Mitsuo to hurry and speak because he doesn't have all day. The thug asks if he has slept with Kana, and Shin replies that he hasn't even seen her since the trip. Mitsuo doesn't believe him and attacks him, but Shin dodges and trips him, telling him to give up because things are different now. Mitsuo stubbornly keeps attacking, but Shin unlocks Ultra Instinct and humbles him without hurting him. Just then, Murano comes there and Shin decides to walk away, but she can already see the change in his personality. She asks him if something happened on the trip or if he is still the same Shin, and he replies that he is asking himself the same question. They then go on a date through the market, and Kana is there too. She predicts Shin will come up the stairs next to her, and her prediction is spot on. She is excited to meet him, but quickly gets disheartened when she sees Murano beside him. Shin returns home after that and finds his dad is still a mess. He has developed a drinking habit, so Shin tells him to hire a housekeeper. But Kazu cannot believe how cold-hearted he sounds and tells him to do what he wants. The next day, Shin tests out his super hearing while walking to school with Murano, and hears someone calling for help. So he rushes to the spot and finds an injured puppy on the street. Migi says that it is too wounded to survive, so Shin picks it up and takes it to the garden to comfort it in its last moments. Murano comes there too and says that she initially thought Shin had changed, but saving the dog shows he is still kind as before. However, he bursts her bubble soon, because as the puppy dies, he throws it into the bin. This terrifies Murano because she can't understand how he could treat the puppy like that. But Shin calmly says it is no longer a puppy, just a dead lump of meat. Murano is disheartened and says he has changed after all, before running away crying. Shin doesn't even get what he did wrong, which is typical male behavior, so he goes to his best friend for advice, which is another typical male move. Migi tells him he didn't say anything wrong logically, but he is clearly different from his original self because the old Shin wouldn't have called a puppy a lump of meat. Shin realizes his mistake and thanks Migi, then goes back and buries the dog properly, although he still thinks about how the dog's body will help the tree get nutrients. Later, he waits outside Murano's class, but she runs away when she sees him, so Shin decides to give her some space. Migi then warns him that there is another alien nearby, and though Shin becomes cautious, Migi says this one is not an enemy and is similar to Tamiya, meaning he might listen to reason and wants to meet. Soon, the alien arrives and Shin confronts him. But just then, the school bully comes and the alien punches him for interrupting their conversation. He then introduces himself as Hideo and tells Shin that he wants to start by becoming friends with him and Migi. Shin is surprised by this suggestion, and Hideo adds that they have gym class together today, and he wants to check out his abilities. During the class, they race, and Shin holds back his speed to not look strange. However, Hideo doesn't hold back his abilities and almost breaks a national record. After class, Hideo talks to Shin in private and says sports are wonderful. But Shin doesn't care about that and asks if Tamiya sent him to kill him. Hideo replies that she has a different name now and that she indeed sent him but not to kill Shin. He says he has no plans to hurt anyone, and adds that he hasn't harmed humans in months because he has learned to eat another kind of meat, which he believes is best for everyone. Shin finds it hard to believe, but Hideo insists that some parasites want to coexist peacefully with humans. Migi half believes him, but then says they should stop talking because he is about to fall asleep and doesn't want Hideo to know that. Shin then goes to Murano's classroom to talk again, but starts thinking about the parasites and becomes angry. When Murano approaches to reconcile with him, she sees his furious face and quietly walks away, much to his disappointment. On the other hand, Kana waits for Shin after school, believing that he is her soulmate and she has a superpower that lets her locate him. She senses him coming and cheerfully greets him, but it turns out to be Hideo instead. Kana gets confused because she was sure it was Shin, and Hideo becomes curious about this. He asks how she thought he and Shin were similar without even seeing him, but Kana refuses to answer. Hideo starts dragging her along to learn the truth, and she screams for help. Luckily, Shin happens to be passing by and rushes to the scene on hearing her screams. Kana runs to him, and Shin asks Hideo what he is doing. He replies that he just wanted to chat with the girl because she is perceptive, but Shin reminds him that if anything happens to the people around him, he will kill Hideo first. Hideo once again says that he has no intention of fighting and simply walks away, noticing that Shin's right hand is giving off a weak signal. After that, Kana thanks Shin, and just then Murano passes by. Kana loudly asks Shin to walk her to the station because she is scared. He agrees, but when he turns around, he sees Murano running away and realizes his mistake too late. But he has no choice except escorting Kana now. While walking Kana to the station, she tells him that she can sense him, but admits that today her radar was off. Shin tells her that this isn't a good thing because she is sensing a dangerous wavelength and tells her to stay away from it. Shin returns home after that and finds Kazu is still a drunken mess. Kazu asks him how he got so strong and says it's like Shin is made of steel, which deals more emotional damage than he could have imagined. The next day, Kana ignores Shin's advice and turns around when she feels he is nearby. But she finds Hideo there instead and tries to escape. Just then, Mitsuo also comes there and picks a fight with Hideo for stalking his girl. Even though Kana warns him not to fight, he ends up going to an isolated place with Hideo and gets his ass whooped. Hideo warns him not to come after him again, because the next time, he will kill him for sure. However, he doesn't notice that Shin's friend Takai was stalking him as well because she has a newfound crush on him. On the other hand, Shin goes to school and stares at the notice board where he first met Murano, but she ignores him once again. Hideo is also nearby, and he senses a faint signal from Migi again that makes him suspicious. He tries using killing intent to draw a reaction from him, but nothing happens, and Hideo starts thinking something is wrong with Migi, or that he is just stupid. That day, as Shin returns home, he finds his father meeting with a government official who believes his monster story, but says they can't make it public because it would cause panic. He says the problem is global and tells Kazu to think of the parasites as wild monsters hiding amongst humans. They also make a sketch based on his descriptions, and the artist draws an accurate picture of the creature's face. Meanwhile, Tamiya has changed her form and is meeting another intelligent parasite. She says that if they keep eating humans without thinking, they will be hunted. The man agrees and says only she has thought this deeply. When she asks about their purpose, he says humans are poison to the earth, and they are here to control the population. Back home, Shin's dad decides to tell him the truth and reveals everything. Shin listens silently and nods, but he doesn't reveal anything about himself. Elsewhere, the sketch artist turns out to be Takai's brother, and one night, Takai peeks into his notebook while he is asleep and sees the parasite's sketch. He suddenly wakes up and takes it back, saying it is part of an investigation. The next day, Takai notices Hideo alone and starts watching him. Again, suddenly, a stray baseball hits him on the head and leaves a dent. He recovers quickly from the injury, and that is enough to freak out Takai and make her realize something is wrong. Meanwhile, Shin decides to talk to Murano and make things right. But just as he is about to do so, Migi warns him that Hideo is turning hostile. It turns out Mitsuo's gang has come to get revenge on him, and he is ready to kill them. Shin quickly rushes to stop him, while Murano is left confused. On the other side, Hideo senses what's happening as well and tells the boys to attack all at once because he doesn't want to wait for Shin. Suddenly, Shin jumps over the wall and arrives there, and Hideo is shocked and wonders how Shin reached him so fast. Shin confronts Hideo and asks if he is finally showing his true self. Hideo says it is not his fault because the boys picked the fight, and Shin tells him to leave because he will handle it. Hideo decides to take his advice and walks away without reacting to the boys' insults. The thugs then mock Shin for protecting a friend, but he gets angry and says Hideo is not his friend. He tells everyone to go home and never target Hideo again for their own safety. Mitsuo is inclined to believe him, but the other boys are not. But then Shin calls out the strongest one among them to fight. The guy suddenly attacks Shin, but he easily blocks his punch, and as he is about to crush his arm to scare everyone, the man realizes the difference in their power levels. He immediately runs away, telling his boys to follow him because they can't win. Shin returns to school after that and finds Murano waiting for him while holding his bag. They are about to patch things up when Shin suddenly pulls her close because Hideo is there. He asks Shin what did he do to the bullies, and he angrily replies that it is none of his business. Hideo walks away, and Murano reminds Shin that he is hurting her hand. He apologizes and lets go of her hand, saying Hideo may seem normal, but he is messed up inside. Murano tries to calm him down and says he has really changed now. She says her Shin would never talk like that, and asks if he is really Shin. He snaps at this and yells at her to shut up, which makes Murano run away crying. Later, Shin sits alone and feels depressed. He thinks he feels this way because of the hole in his heart. Migi tries to help and says Shin has become stronger both physically and mentally, and it doesn't matter what other people think about him. Elsewhere, Taikai is still following Hideo, and she finally sees him changing his face, which terrifies her. She has heard stories about the face-changing monsters, and she knows who can tell her more about that. She goes home and asks her brother about monsters, and he says they can possess human bodies and eat people. Taikai starts believing that Hideo is a monster as well, but she also feels uncertain and scared. She decides to talk to Hideo first instead of taking action, which is a peak-smooth brain decision. The next day at school, Taikai calls Hideo to meet and brings a bottle of acid for her self-defense. When Hideo comes and asks why she called him, she says she liked him but saw him doing strange things. She asks if he really is a monster who eats people. Hideo asks what if he is, and she says he should go home without hurting anyone. Hideo gets angry because his secret is out, and he transforms to kill her. At the same time, Migi senses the danger and warns Shin, who is furious at Taikai for being so reckless and stupid. Shin storms out of the class and runs through the hallway to find Taikai, but he can't know where she exactly is. On the other side, Taikai is already panicking because Hideo has revealed his true form. He tells her not to move, promising a painless death if she cooperates. He attacks her, but she trips and dodges his strike somehow. She then finds the acid bottle, and she throws it at him in desperation. Hideo cuts it in midair, but the acid falls on him and burns his face. He starts screaming in pain and transforms further, and Taikai uses the chance to escape. She climbs out of the window while students standing on the ground look up and notice her. But before they can react, a tentacle lashes out suddenly. Taikai jumps down in fear, but a tree breaks her fall, and the students rush to check on her and then decide to go upstairs to see what just happened. Meanwhile, Hideo is panicking because he morphed without thinking, and some of the acid has gotten inside his body. His face is now deformed, and he can't think clearly or control his expressions because of the damaged tissues in the way. Migi picks up on his incoherent and scattered thoughts and tells Shin that they need to hurry. At the same time, the students and teachers who go upstairs run into Hideo in his morphed state, and he instinctively kills them all before fleeing, which Migi immediately notifies to Shin. Some of the surviving teachers witness the carnage and scream in terror before sounding the alarm and calling the police. Migi senses that Hideo is heading toward their class, so he and Shin rush back, but they run into a panicked crowd at the entrance. Migi says they should use the crowd to evacuate safely, but the teachers are still panicking and say one class is missing. Shin realizes it is Murano's class and rushes to find her. On his way up, Shin sees students running down in fear, but Murano isn't among them, and he refuses to accept losing her. He reaches the floor and sees piles of corpses, and for a moment, his mind goes blank as he screams in terror. Migi tells him to calm down and control his breathing, and Shin thinks about how his father and Murano told him that he was different now. He realizes how much he has changed when he quickly regains focus and swears to save Murano by killing Hideo himself. He moves forward and spots someone who looks like Murano, but luckily, it turns out to be a different person. He continues ahead and uses his enhanced hearing to locate 3 people, and when he goes there, he finds Murano among them. As soon as she sees him, she hugs him tightly, and Shin tells her they have to leave quickly. The other boys panic because they know the massacre happened in the direction Shin came from, and they think he might be one of the monsters, so they run in the opposite direction and get chopped down instantly. Realizing Hideo is nearby, Shin grabs Murano and runs into an empty classroom, then jumps out the window, leaps over the school fence, and takes her to safety. Murano is still terrified and trembling, so he comforts her gently and hands her over to the emergency services before turning back and walking toward the school. By now, the police have completely surrounded the area, so it is not easy to get in. But when Migi asks if he still wants to fight, Shin says it is their responsibility to end this. Migi believes that the police will eventually get Hideo, but Shin watches as Hideo kills a bunch of officers and escapes to the rooftop while injured. He decides the only way to defeat Hideo is to snipe him, so he goes 300 meters away to avoid detection. He waits patiently for Hideo to come to the rooftop, then fuses his power with Migi's aimbot to yeet a rock like a bullet. The rock pierces Hideo's heart perfectly, and the police find his dead body shortly after.